Hi, it's Dwyer. It is December 27th, 2024. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site for those of you into crypto. Dwyer70905.substack.com. Let's talk boxing 2024. Let's give some closing thoughts on the year. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, let me point out, life's unfair. I'm not here trying to be fair, right? I've made some editorial decisions here. I'm just giving you my view. This is one man's opinion, right? If you think I've been unfair to the sport or unfair to any particular fighter, please feel free to leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. My fighter of the year is Alexander Usyk. Again, life's unfair, in my opinion. The heavyweight division means more than the other divisions. I believe most fans, including most casual fans, can name at least one heavyweight champion from each of the last 5 decades. Try doing that with other divisions. Let's just say it is a bit more challenging. What makes Usyk the fighter of the year? 2 victories over a future Hall of Famer, Tyson Fury. Let me point out that his 9th round in the first fight over a then unbeaten lineal heavyweight champion is the round of the year. Understand, he went into that fight as the underdog. Had that 9th round not happened, Fury likely would have won that first fight. And even if Usyk won the second fight, we would feel that he wasn't fully the heavyweight champion. There would still be that feeling that the crown is divided. Let me just say, too, the first fight, in my opinion, could have gone either way. The second fight clearly belonged to Alexander Usyk. The exclamation point was his domination of the second half of the fight. As I said in an earlier video, we won't find out what fully happened in Fury's corner for several years, right? Either Tyson Fury was completely deluded and thought he could win this fight by, in his opinion, outboxing Usyk without hurting him, or he and his corner understood that he was being outgunned by a guy who was just a better athlete with more stamina and more hand speed, and that he couldn't make up the difference, right? The truth is somewhere in there. Right now, it's hazy. But what I believe is clear is that Tyson Fury did not do enough in the rematch to take Usyk's title, and yes, it was Usyk's title because of the decision in the first fight. Let's talk about the most unfair moment of the year in boxing. Right, folks, it's Ryan Garcia beating Devin Haney. You know, it's preposterous in hindsight. It's absolutely ridiculous that this fight went forward when Ryan Garcia blew weight by more than 3 rounds. And he was, of course, supposed to be the puncher in the fight. Right, folks, it's ridiculous. The guy with the heavier punch blows weight not by a few ounces, not by a pound, but by more than 3 pounds. That's preposterous. It's even more absurd when you find out that he had Osterin in his system. Right, as I've said, there are certain performance-enhancing drugs or weight-cutting drugs that a fighter has plausible deniability about. In other words, you get busted with clenbuterol in your system, you can claim that you ate tainted meat. Right? There's always the cover story. Some drugs have cover stories where you can say, you know, I took this anti-cough medication that's over the counter. Little did I know that it had this prohibited PED substance in it. Right here, there's no alibi. You only have Osterin in your system for one reason. You're cutting corners. Now, of course, whenever you have multiple people involved, right? A trainer, a nutritional person, perhaps, right? Other people, seconds. Whenever you have groups involved, there's plausible deniability. The fighter, of course, is going to say, I have no idea how this modern designer drug that was created in a lab got into my system right before a big title fight where I was going to be tested for drugs. Right? There's always the cover story. Just understand that here a cover story was needed because, quite frankly, the blowing weight and having a PED in your system that's a designer drug is a bridge too far to cross. Let me just say this, though. Haney is not without blame. You're fighting Ryan Garcia, who you know stands too upright, who you fought before in the amateurs, who you know has a big left hook. That's his A-plus punch. What are you doing getting hit multiple times with that left hook? Right? Maybe that left hook was a little bit more sudden because of the Osterin in Garcia's system. But still, let's just say Haney fought a defensive fight that was far from perfect. Let's talk about some other unfair moments of the year in boxing. An honorable mention goes out to Virgil Ortiz's victory, and we'll put that in quotes. I thought he lost the fight to Sergey Bohachuk. Bohachuk knocks him down twice. You want to know how absurd the event was? You saw the knockdown where he gets hits the canvas, it's a clean punch. Ortiz, who needs to learn some humility, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt since he's still in his mid-20s. But Ortiz, of course, jumps off the canvas and tries to pretend that he slipped, that it wasn't a knockdown. Player, we don't play that. You get hit, you get dropped. Let's just say you've hit the canvas, right, off a punch. That's a knockdown. Don't try to defraud us now by claiming that it wasn't really a knockdown. We have the replays at home. Maybe Ortiz didn't realize that that part of the fight would have replays. We have the replays at home. We know you got dropped. Somehow, in the event, they didn't rule one of the knockdowns as a knockdown for several rounds. Folks, as I said, it was preposterous. You got the feeling that Virgil Ortiz hired everyone. Well, here's the point I want to make. And the fight was an excellent fight. It was highly competitive. Right? Highly competitive when Ortiz was not getting knocked down. Well, because Ortiz is knocked down twice, folks, that's two 10-8s. He's not knocked down twice in the same round. We're not talking about 1 10-7 round, which would have given Bohachuk a 3-round advantage. No, he's knocked down in 2 different rounds. That's a 4-round advantage to Bohachuk. 4 rounds. So it makes no sense that the fight could go to the scorecards and that Bohachuk would lose. let me point out too that there was a group. Now this is different. This is different than the Fury Usyk rematch. There's a group here that actually knows Ortiz is losing. It's his corner. They tell him, you need a knockout to win the fight. That's with something like 3 rounds to go. They know their guy's losing. Well, you know the rest. 3 spirited rounds happen after that. It's not like Boachuk is getting pillared from, post to post. No, 3 spirited rounds happen after that. So, let's just say, I have no doubt as I sit here today that Robert Garcia knows his fighter got away with one here. Right? I have no doubt. I understand boxing culture. I get the idea that guys after the fight aren't going to say, man, we got away with one. Our guy got his butt kicked and they gave us a gift. Right? We understand everyone's going to say, well, it was a close fight. Our guy really, bit down on his mouthpiece and really showed us a lot of courage in those last few rounds. Right? Everyone's going to try to put a spin on it to justify the outcome. Just understand that, in my opinion, that outcome was bogus. I call Virgil Ortiz Secretariat. I feel he's one of the best in the sport pound for pound. But let's call it like we see it. He lost that fight. Right? I have no doubt about that. Now, I understand there was some familiarity between the fighters. Right? They were both involved at one point with Manny Robles and were sparring a lot. Right? But I don't care what the backstory was. Just understand, on the night they fought, Boachuk beat Virgil Ortiz. Let's talk about another fight, and this is boxing, right? Let's face it. If I decided to list every unfair moment in the sport, I'd be here all day, wouldn't I? But let's list one more. Johnny Fisher's, again in quotes, victory over Dave Allen. Here again, there's familiarity. These 2 guys are actually buddies. These 2 guys have actually sparred in the past. Now, I thought, since Dave Allen's at the part of his career where he's fighting opponents with below 500 records, look at his record, I thought unbeaten Johnny Fisher was going to make a showcase of his fight. Right? Fisher's 25 or so. He's fighting a guy who is 7 years older than him. Right? In boxing, that's an entire generation. So I thought Fisher was going to come out. I thought Fisher, because he knew Allen, only took the fight because he knew he could beat Allen. Didn't happen. Right? I know the judges somehow came up with a way to give Fisher the win. I'm not alleging corruption. But let's just say it's amazing how these young, favored, unbeaten fighters get breaks in fights. Right? It's almost as if the judges know who can make the promoter more money down the road. Again, I'm not accusing anyone of corruption. Let's just say the problem, in my opinion, is systemic. We all watch fights, and we all know who the favorite is. We all know who the next big thing in boxing is supposed to be. Well, let me just say, someone forgot to tell Dave Allen. Fisher gets dropped. He's discombobulated. He's desperate. He's trying to clinch Dave Allen. He can't do so properly. Allen always seems to have a hand free. Shockingly, and I mean this, right? It's shocking. Fisher cannot stop Allen, a guy who he sparred with. from landing uppercuts. Allen figures out if he stands at a certain angle, he can throw a chopping right hand. Also, because Fisher is lackadaisical in terms of leaning over the pocket of all places. Right player, pick another place to lean over in the ring. He's leaning over the pocket. You have Allen hitting him with devastating uppercuts. They're devastating. These are the kind of uppercuts that shorten careers. Let me also say, too, that Fisher is leaning over the pocket because he seems off balance and can't fight the usual fight that he fights from distance. In other words, you got the feeling he's trying to smother Allen, because if he tries to fight Allen from distance, he might get stopped. Let's just say, here again, I thought this decision was embarrassing for the sport. Right? Fisher's own dad pointed out that Allen could have been awarded the decision. Allen, and I'll give him credit, Allen's one of these guys who, right before it's announced, as they're announcing the scores, right, Allen's looking around and he's mouthing the words, "I won this fight." Then they announce the score and he's a gentleman. Right? They rip him off. They give it to his younger friend. He goes over, taps the friend on the shoulder, knowing he's been ripped off. I thought that was ridiculous. Right? Let's just say, as I analyze fights going forward, as I see it, Boachuk is 1-0 on Virgil Ortiz. Dave Allen is 1-0 on Johnny Fisher. The sport's going to sell Ortiz and Fisher to you as unbeaten fighters. Let's also talk about one of the great things in boxing, but it makes the sport controversial. Folks, we're watching a different sport. In other words, you're seated in a sports book, an arena, if you actually attend these fights. You think you're all seeing the same fight. You're not. Right? There's a group of you who are looking for certain things, and there's another group of you who are looking for other things. So let's talk about one of the classics of the year, Arthur Beterbiev against Dmitry Bivol. Now, I'm part of the back foot crowd, I'll call it. I see Bivol making a miss. I see Beterbiev afraid for rounds, multiple rounds, to throw right hands. Right? I see Bivol blocking the shots. At the end of the fight, and this is a heartfelt moment, right? It's the reverse of the Beterbiev corner. At the end of the fight, Bivol looks at his corner. He's happy. His corner is happy. As he walks over to the corner, there isn't a doubt. This is not a made-for-TV movie. There is not a doubt to the Bivol side of the ledger that he won the fight. As I watched the fight, the only question I had in the middle of the 11th round was whether Bivol was going to stay upright, because nobody else has, against Beterbiev, who went into the fight with a 100% knockout ratio. Right? The only question I had was whether Bivol would stay upright through the rest of the 11th round and the 12th round. Right? My thought process was he's put in work. He's beaten this guy. All he has to do is stay upright, not get knocked down, make it to the end of the fight. He's made his point. But there's another group. Their views are equally valid. We'll call this the front foot crowd. Right? Hall of Famer Bernard Hopkins watched this fight. Bernard, technician. Right? One of the best technicians I know of, quite frankly, in the years I've watched boxing. Right? Highly technical guy. He belongs to this crowd. He thought Beterbiev won the fight. Understand how this crowd thinks, right? These are the people sitting right next to you, watching the same fight with you, right? This is boxing. We can't look at a tape like they do in track and field and say, who nicked this? Who hit the tape first? That's not the way the sport works, right? This is figure skating with boxing gloves. So the front foot crowd makes the point that Beterbiev is never at risk of being stopped. He is initiating the action. Who's the ring general? The guy who's trying to mix it up or the guy who's not trying to mix it up? Right? There's no Tyson Fury second half of the fight dispute here on stamina. Because Beterbiev, as is his signature, is relentless from start to finish. At the end of the fight, it's a bad visual, and yes, visuals matter. Bivol looks marked up. Now, if you're a back foot crowd person, Bivol's marked up because of his excellent defense, because he's defensively blessed. Right? Those marks aren't caused by Beterbiev's punches, at least not directly. They're caused by Bivol's defensive construct. So Bivol has a hand up. You don't see him getting hit flush. He has a hand up. So Beterbiev's hitting his glove, and the glove is hitting Bivol's face. My side of the ledger would argue that that's great defense. The other side of the ledger is going to say, look, man, our guy was unmarked. If your guy was marked up, how could the marks be construed as a positive? Also, at the end of the fight, if you're on the Bivol side of the ledger, you're looking at the clock. You were literally thinking, 50 seconds left. 40 seconds left. 30 seconds left, right? On the Beterbiev side of the ledger, Beterbiev looked fresh. So understand, we're not going to agree on this. This is like Hagler-Leonard, right? Where the film could be on. You could be watching Marvin hitting Ray with a lot of body shots. Then you see Ray flurry in the last 30 seconds. And there's going to be the crowd that says, look at the last 30 seconds. And you're going to be thinking, man, what about the other 2.5 minutes of the round? Right? This fight's going to be like that, where you and your buddy, right? A back foot person could be sitting there having a malt with a front foot person. And you're going to be watching the film, and both of you are going to be talking about different things. You both love boxing, but the sport is complicated, right? Whatever side of the ledger that you were on, let's just say Beterbiev versus Bivol, or, depending on how you saw it, Bivol versus Beterbiev was and will remain a classic. I'm actually a little bit hesitant on the second fight, as I would have been if Ray Leonard had fought Marvin Hagler a second time, right? Because the first fight is so iconic, right? Just like I feel over time, we're going to forget the greatness of the first Fury-Usyk fight because of the second fight. I almost hope that the Beterbiev-Bivol fight is as close the second time around as it was the first time around. Now let's talk about the luckiest B. And I say B, which is short for a more risque word that ends with a D. Let's talk about the luckiest B in boxing in 2024. Folks, I believe it was Triple D, Daniel Dubois. He has 2 fights in 2024. One against Filip Ergovic, the other against Anthony Joshua. Now, how do you get hit and stay upright against all of the Ergovic right hands that he ate. Right, folks? If this was by design, Dubois made a decision to take the shots that is the most stunning decision of the year in the sport. Right? It's the kind of decision a fighter can only make when he's in his mid-20s. I encourage everyone to revisit the early rounds of that fight. It's shocking how many right hands Ergovic lands. It's shocking. Let's talk about the AJ fight. In the AJ fight, he catches AJ early. Now, let's be clear here too, right? I don't want to pull the punch here. The fight is in AJ's house. That's what Wembley is. The reason why they got 80-odd thousand people or more is because of Anthony Joshua. Right? AJ could have pulled 80-plus thousand fighters fighting other guys. Right? If he fought Tyson Fury, he would pull that crowd. Just understand, Dubois could only get that crowd fighting Anthony Joshua. Right? Don't overlook who the fans actually love. Right? So they're fighting in AJ's house. Dubois catches AJ early. AJ never regains his balance or his defense. At one point, it looks like AJ twists an ankle. Let me just say, I give AJ a lot of credit for not blaming an ankle. Right? I give AJ a lot of credit for owning the loss. Right? So, let me just say, we have a heavyweight champion in his 20s. Now, historically, that shouldn't be remarkable, right? Because we've had young heavyweight champions. Look at Patterson. Look at Ali. Look at Tyson, right? We've had young guys as heavyweight champion. But folks, the sport has evolved, and it's interesting how it's evolved into a heavyweight division that's dominated by 30-somethings. Right? It's astonishing. Well, let me just say this. How can I call Daniel Dubois lucky? Right? And I thought the line was out of whack. I said so here online before the fight. But how can we call Daniel Dubois lucky when he knocks down AJ so many times? And let me just say, it's because the fight contains the sequence of the year. Right? Boxing careers turn on such moments. So let's remember the 5th round. Right? If you're going to look at one sequence from the year, I think the 5th round of Dubois AJ needs to be on your list. Forget the rest of the fight. Understand, a puncher only has to be right once. So just understand, this fight could have ended differently. Right? AJ gets Dubois in transition. Dubois is a blessed puncher. He's not blessed defensively. Let's just say he's a young guy learning the sport. His thought process is very different than the thought process of, let's say, a Floyd Mayweather, right? A Salvador Sanchez. Those masters are always looking around the ring, wondering where they are in the ring, right? They're not over in some side of the ring by happenstance. They know where they are in the ring. They get the tempo of the fight. They know the punches they have to be concerned with. I don't believe at this stage of his career that's Daniel Dubois, right? This is the fight right after Dubois eating right hand after right hand from Filip Ergovic, who can punch. Look at the KO percentage. So here he is against Anthony Joshua. Joshua has been hitting the canvas with frequency in the fight. But Joshua is a blessed puncher. Right? Understand, Joshua thinks like a blessed puncher. So for everything that happened, right? Joshua's in car crash after car crash in the fight. Right? Joshua finds himself back on the road. He sees Dubois. He lands a right hand on Daniel Dubois. Let me just say, if you're fighting Anthony Joshua, try to stay away from his right hand. Right? He lands a right hand on Dubois. Now, Dubois is one of these Generation Z guys. He's what I call a poker player. Right? Dubois, even when he's getting off the canvas after multiple Kevin Lorena fights, right? Dubois has a poker face, right? I thought the moment before the fight, when the two guys are in the middle of the ring, AJ's trying to look tough. You got that feeling, right? AJ's trying to look tough. Dubois has his poker face up. Dubois looks like he's just trying to cross the street, right? So Dubois is bluffing, in my opinion. He gets hit with a right hand from AJ. AJ senses that he has Dubois a little out of his depth. So Dubois, of course, does what? This isn't the Mayweather who gets tagged by Shane Mosley and stays in the middle of the ring. That's what wins Mayweather the fight. Stays in the middle of the ring, actually holds Mosley's arm. Revisit that fight. No, this is younger Daniel Dubois. Right? In fairness to Mayweather, when he was young, was a savant. Right? Well, just understand, Dubois starts to back up. Grab the whole sequence. There's a right hand before the last two that AJ tries to throw. So AJ comes over and lands another right hand. He has Dubois right where he wants him. So as AJ, who's too excited, gets ready to throw one of the sport's best right hands, Dubois gets off a very short, and I give Dubois credit. Again, boxing turns on these moments. Dubois gets off a very short right hand that hits AJ right on the chin. Right? Let's just say AJ's not Floyd Mayweather either. Right? Had AJ just put his left hand up by his chin, his very next punch, which was certain to be a right hand up top, could have ended the fight. I want people to revisit the film, look at the spacing, look at where Dubois is. Right? Understand, history is replete with guys who were bouncing off the canvas, right? Archie Moore against Yvonne Durrell, right? Where Archie Moore hits the canvas several times in the fight. And of course, Archie comes back, right? When you're a puncher, you think, hey, all I need to do is land once. Foreman, the second knockdown against Ron Lyle, he hits the canvas face first, right? It's as bad as any dropping AJ did in this fight. But Foreman, being a puncher, understood, hey, all I need to do is hit this guy once flush. And that's what Foreman did to beat Ron Lyle. Right? So AJ knows he's in a shootout. AJ's hit the canvas multiple times. He knows, because he's a puncher, he's only one punch away. He has Daniel Dubois backing up into the ropes. right? Dubois is not moving forward to clinch him. Dubois is not circling AJ, keeping it in the middle of the ring. No, he does what you're not supposed to. What I want people to do too is to look at the last punch of the fight. It's Dubois' last knockdown. And look at Dubois' hands. Right, folks? Just off the tempo, you know AJ is going to come back with a right hand. You know that. Dubois' hands are low. They're not up here. There's nothing to squeeze through. He's not, covered up or anything like that. There's nothing between Dubois and AJ's right hand at that moment. But Daniel Dubois is offensively blessed. Dubois himself is a puncher. Right? So Dubois, really defenseless, throws the picture perfect right hook to AJ's jaw. That's why Dubois has a belt today. Right? As I said, he's the luckiest bee of the year. Right? Boxing is filled with a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas. Right? AJ could have had a hand up protecting his chin. He didn't. Dubois could have made the mistake of, not taking advantage of AJ's open chin. He didn't. One man walked away with the victory. It was Daniel Dubois. Finally, let's talk about the arrival of the year. Right, this is the fighter who has gone from obscurity to having a legitimate shot to take over a division. At 154 pounds, we have a new name in the mix, and he's already near the top of one of boxing's best divisions. That's Bakram Murtazalayev. Folks, this is what I call a ringer. He was the mandatory contender for over a year. Jamel Charlo had the common sense not to fight him, was paying him step-aside money. Well, folks, he's almost a 6-footer. He looks big against Tim Tszyu. He towered over Tszyu. Right? He had something like a 3-4 inch height advantage on Tim Tszyu. Yet, and this is really a third world story, yet he weighed less than 153 pounds at the weigh-in. Now, while Dubois is learning the sport, in other words, you're watching a Dubois fight and you're thinking, wow, your hands are really down against Anthony Joshua as you're over by the ropes. While you're befuddled watching some of what Dubois does. This guy's the finished product. Murtazalayev. Right? He has defense. He's two-handed. Right? They kept talking about one of his hands, right hand or something. Folks, he's two-handed. Right? This is a Zhili Zhang type guy, where you see the guy, and as you watch the guy, you start to realize that the water is deep. That the guy isn't just a puncher. The guy's a complete boxer. Murtazalayev is a master in the pocket. Right? There's a subset of fighters who, when they're in the pocket, they have few peers. Whatever you think about Teofimo Lopez, he is a master in the pocket. Right? I've looked at a lot of heavyweight boxing. The best guy I know of in the heavyweight division in the pocket was Sonny Liston. Right? This guy is a master in the pocket. He overwhelmed Tim Tszyu. He knocks him down 3 times in 3 rounds. Today, I would take him over Errol Spence. Right? Understand, I would expect Spence, who's new to 154, right? Whose health to me is being covered up. This is the guy who had eye surgery, and every Spence report that you read is, oh, he's back. Oh, Spencer's fine. Oh, the car crash. Why worry about that? Right? Even though Spence post car crash isn't the same fighter. He did look good in the, forget the guy's name, but the guy beat Manny Pacquiao. He did look good in that fight. Right? But just understand that Errol Spence isn't prime Errol Spence anymore in my eyes. Right? How long should it have taken him to figure out that Terence Crawford was trying to jab him to death? Well, understand, Murtazaliev against Spence would be a special fight because Murtazaliev is one of the few fighters in the sport who would feel at home in the pocket against Errol Spence. Right? Spence, no doubt, would go to the body. The problem is, if you're within punching range of Murtazaliev, who, again, two-handed, a lot of different punches, I believe you're in trouble. In other words, I feel few guys in the sport can stay in the pocket with this guy. Now, the question at 154 is, do you even have the option of staying in the pocket against Sebastian Fundora? Right? Tall guy. Right? This is the 6'5", 6'6" guy at 154. Or Virgil Ortiz, who for all of his problems, for his loss to Boachuk, has one of the sport's best jabs. Right? Sergio Mora calls it a power jab. Right? Ortiz, when he's not nervous and moving around the ring too much, has a Larry Holmes level jab. And of course, he's a blessed puncher. Right? So 154, keep an eye out. This is a loaded division. Right? This is a division where there's going to be a lot of volatility. But the division has a ringer. It's Murtazaliev. Let's just say, as big fights are announced, I'm going to be looking at this guy hard as having a chance. Those are my thoughts. These are the moments of this year that really struck me. Let me hear from you. Keep in mind, this is a year where NOA hit the canvas in a fight. Right? This is a year where Zurdo, Gilberto Ramirez, conquers the cruiserweight division, at least the parts not occupied by J.O. Pataya. Right? This is a year where Moses Atama has us asking the question of not whether he's the best teenager since Tyson. Right? He has me at least asking the question of whether or not he's ready right now to fight an Usyk. Right? Yes, Southpaws are taking over the heavyweight division. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. 2024 was quite the year in boxing. Now that Riyadh season is upon us, I get the feeling the sport's going to continue to lift its game in 2025. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section. Thanks for stopping by.